work generally outside in nature, in burial chambers and sometimes theatre, but I mix clown, shamanic practice and ritual together.
Great.
So that's my thing.
Thanks. And then next round clockwise, I've got Laura Murphy.
Hi, so I'm just getting the hang of Zoom. It's really strange doing this online situation. I'm a performance maker and academic. I've just finished my PhD, perfect timing, researching aerial work as critical practice. And when we're not in the middle of a global pandemic, I've been touring my solo show, Contra, which is a one-woman, I guess we pitch it as a feminist circus show, but actually I really see it as a kind of interdisciplinary bit of theatre that uses aerial work amongst other things. And I'm also naked. Very exciting.
Not right now, in the show.
Not right now, not today, but it is only 12 o'clock.
Cool, and thank you. And then last round at the moment, we've got Charlie. Oh, Charlie's not got his microphone switched on yet. There we go.
Yes, finding out how it all goes like everybody else in this world of Zoom. I'm Charlie Holland. I was a professional juggler, and then I became the program director at the Circus Space, now the National Centre for Circus Arts in London, and have had a long interest in how circus relates to other performing mediums, so variety, vaudeville, that whole area. And currently I'm researching a book on the Marvellous Crags, who were an acrobatic troupe in the Victorian time.
Great, thank you. So the theme of today, if you didn't see this before you followed the link in, is circus and academia, bundle the words together and call it circademics. It's more fun that way. And potentially we have Olga Lucia Solzano joining us from Colombia, but we'll catch that up when we get there. And as I did mention just before we started, we are dedicating today's show to the memory of Cotton Macaloon, who was a juggler, sadly died suddenly this weekend. I didn't know him. So Charlie, did you want to say a couple of words?
Yes, I can. So Cotton, born in California, brought up in France, lived in England, lived most recently in Berlin, and was one of those just extraordinarily street performers of the 1980s who just sustained a career and was such a light, fluid, easy juggler, so personable. You may have seen him in recent years in varieties in Germany, in Circus Flick Flack, and a huge presence, a huge inspiration to many of us. Very sad news that he's passed away suddenly in his apartment in Berlin. And I think this is the time to sort of say, for those people who are affected by the news of Cotton's death or by generally the events happening in this very peculiar part of time, do reach out, talk to people, rather than just sort of festering up emotions and feelings on your own. There are organisations like mine, like the Samaritans. Go and talk to them if you are feeling that events at the moment are tricky.
Thank you, Charlie. And I should mention as well, as part of this Zoom panel discussion series that Clown Power are running, there's this time next week, there's a session run by Clown Holly Stoppit, which is going to be all to do with mental health. So again, for anybody who is maybe figuring out how this whole new pandemic era works for them, that might be something worth tuning into. And I think maybe a good place to segue into our discussion is to start again with Claire, because a lot of your work does revolve around grief and coping strategies. Is that right?
It is, yes. So I found myself deeply grieving over the loss of my child quite a few years ago now, and I ended up working. Well, I got some beautiful Japanese paper and started working around the seashore, and then got an artist residency with National Theatre Wales and started to explore through the use of clown just exploring, basically, my loss on the seashore, and then found myself going to Neolithic burial chambers. Anglesy's got a wonderful lot of burial chambers up there. So I found a lot of healing through the art of clown, and certainly just being in hospital, losing my child and finding myself waddling down a corridor with just a giant nappy on, you know, I had to laugh amidst all of this. And so I found myself then researching again. I have a background in drama therapy and clown and fine art, and I've ended up bringing them all together and have created a solo show called Alach, which is swan in the Welsh language. And that very much looks at grief and the proximity of laughter and tears together. So I have a performance which I've toured around the world, and it's different every time. There are no words, it's song, ritual, paper, clown, and it's very interesting to see the different responses from different cultures, whether Siberia, Japan, Wales, England. And as a result of all of this, bringing the strands together of drama therapy and shamanic practice, which I actively do, and ritual. I trained at Roehampton in drama therapy, which has a strong focus on ritual theatre. I found myself bringing these together, and then had the opportunity to give a lecture and then write about my artistic practice. And that really brought me into sort of the academic side of writing and researching. So it's been quite interesting for me, finding my own coping mechanism for creative expression of healing, and then really embracing clown for what that means to me, which is the whole of our lives. I trained with Sue Morrison, Clown Through Mask, 11 years ago now. And there were 4 principles there. Present yourself, take me into your world, transform me, and bring me back with a new awareness. And that certainly transformed my clowning, but also it, for me, links in with the process of ritual and shamanic practice, of being actively present, but also in kind of 2 places at the same time. Just as clown, you need to be present, but also connected elsewhere. And it also feeds into my work as a healthcare clown, working in hospitals and places for people with dementia, and work with refugees or the homeless using clown. And again, it kind of all links for me together.
I think those principles as well can also relate to the academic side of it. I know you didn't mention that specifically, but taking the existing knowledge and transforming it, that seems like what the academic process is in its own way. So thank you for that introduction, Claire. What the question that I had planned to begin with was very similar. So what is the relationship between your creative practice and your academic practice, which you've sort of answered a little bit. So maybe Laura or Charlie would like to add into that. I'm remembering to do microphones. I keep forgetting mine. There we go. I'm going to turn mine off, and Laura or Charlie, throw yourself in.
I'm happy to start. So if you'd asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have said that there is no relationship. And then I decided that I would do a talk about the marvellous Craggs, who lived locally in Kennington. And the venue I chose to do it in was reminiscent of the gymnasium they had. And at that point, I decided that it would be interesting to do the story in the character of Edward Cragg, the eldest son of the family, who worked with his dad for 50 years, as the end of an era, at the time when the gymnasium was about to be demolished. And it was really interesting then getting at absolutely into the character of somebody who, at that point in his life, would have been in the region of 5 to 10 years older than me, and trying to portray somebody who had once been incredibly physical, able to turn 100 somersaults, who'd been a child performer in Wilton's music hall, and trying to get into the character, the costume, the props. So that was really how, starting off with what was essentially an academic study into a family and the world they inhabited, turned into actually creating and performing something, and something which, when I've written the book, I aim to go and do again. So that's me.
Thank you. And then Laura, what's your take on combining the research and the academics and the practice?
Well, I mean, the show that I'm touring now has completely, the research for it has all of it's completely grown out of my PhD research. I don't know, I'm trying to remember the name of the guy who has written the really seminal practice-led research book. One of you will surely be able to tell me, Robin, or academics. I'll remember his name. But anyway, there's a practice-led research book which is kind of you're encouraged to read it. I think doing practice-led research at sort of MA and PhD level. And what's interesting is that I think in this book, the author talks a lot about how good practice is not necessarily good research, and how good research isn't necessarily good practice. And I completely disagree with it. I did what you're not supposed to do, which is use your PhD time to explore being an artist, and use your PhD as a platform to kind of springboard your artistic career. And for some reason you're not meant to do that, but I have done that, and for me it was a strong move. Now I have a PhD and I feel like a really well researched artistic practice. And for me, what's useful about the relationship between academia and my professional artistic practice is that, for me, academia kind of sometimes provides, I guess, reason or other voices or ways of unpacking kind of creative impulses that my gut's kind of telling me to follow, or my intuition is telling me to follow, and actually being able to kind of justify that and analyze that and critique that, using other voices, using other ideas, has been really, really useful. And in a way, I think it provides so far I've provided a more well-rounded and balanced way of me thinking about my practice, because I've always got these different ways of kind of offsetting and interrogating ideas. I think it's a beautiful relationship. And now my PhD is finished, and I'm looking to make another show. I'm delving back into all my PhD research and thinking about ideas I've begun to unpack around. I'm looking at the moment at virtuosity and mental health and sort of ideas of wholeness. But when my PhD ideas run out, I think I might, feel like I've got to do a postdoc or something then, because that relationship is so valuable to me as an artist.
Great, thank you. And I noticed that Charlie's managed to put into the text chat there the book I think you're talking about, Practice as Research in the Arts, Principles, Protocols, Pedagogies, Resistances, by Robin Nelson. That's the one. Great.
That's fun, yeah.
So we do, so Olga Lucia-Solzano, who is going to be the other panelist, is sort of in the background trying to make her way to log in. So she'll hopefully be with us soon for her introduction. I noticed that with the panel members that we've got today, there's quite a large area of kind of circus research that's not being covered so much, which is the social circus aspect of how circus training can help people who aren't intending to be professional performers, just with other kind of ways to live better and to live well. So with that sort of gap in mind, I was wondering if there was any other particular gaps in the research that you've come across yourself that you think would be really interesting places for people to fill going forward, or that you would like to know more about? And I should say as well that if there's people listening who aren't on the panel and want to feed in questions, we have got this text chat panel at the side. You can scroll down to the bottom of your screen, get the icon up, and it will pop up the text chat window that we'll respond to. But yeah, Laura.
I mean, just to add on, by the way, the Robin Nelson book is actually a great book. I'm not knocking it. You should read it if you're doing any sort of practice-led research. But my experience has kind of taken a different trajectory, but still excellent reading. That aside, I think the question you're asking, Kate, is huge, because actually circus is so under-researched. I don't even know how I'd begin to answer that, like in a single question. I mean, I've done a whole PhD, and on aerial work as critical practice. I haven't even moved on to other disciplines within circus. Yeah, and I feel like I'm still thinking of things that I didn't say about aerial work, or things that I should have looked at. And yeah, I don't even know where you begin. There's so much. I think it would be nice as an artist and as a researcher. I guess my focus and interest is politically and socially engaged work. And also, I guess I would like to see more circus used in an interdisciplinary context. And I include clowning within that as well. I guess clowning actually in a way is one part of circus which seems to reach out more to other disciplines and other kind of performance sectors, but yeah, interdisciplinarity.
Cool, thank you. And yeah, I appreciate what you say, that this gap is huge. I think there's more gap than there are the little pockets of research within that. So I suppose it's just people's particular interest in particular gaps is where the research starts to expand. So Charlie and Claire, do you have particular like areas that you want to expand on as to what's there already? Microphone, Charlie. Oh. I can see Charlie's mouth moving, but I can't hear anything because his microphone's switched off. Can't I? Oh.
Okay, I hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah.
Good. Right. So just to be clear, am I really an academic? I don't have an MA or a PhD. I don't work in a university setting. So in a way, my interest is perhaps in the academic area without going to an academic establishment, without being in that formal realm, but still being very active in an informal way. And one of the things which has really interested me has been the way that the juggling network really get into this kind of discussion. They really are active in debates online in very many ways. And I don't get that same sort of sense of real debate happening in the aerial and the acrobatic world in the same way. I recently, out of frustration in a way, I set up a group, History of Acrobatic and Gymnastic Performance on Facebook, because I was having all of these fascinating conversations into the meaning of words, or what is the definition of a cascade beyond the obvious definition, as it were, with jugglers. And this sort of thing didn't seem to be happening with the acrobatic world. So that to me is a gap, and hopefully, at least in one area, having that Facebook group may help to start to address it.
Fabulous, thank you. And I can see that Olga has just arrived. Morning, Olga. It's horribly early where you are, I know. So thank you for joining and putting up with the troubles getting in. We were just having a conversation about what our individual relationships are between our academic practice and our creative practice, and that sort of went into where we think there are gaps in circus research in general that might be useful to be filled. So before I sort of get Claire's thoughts on that, if that's okay, maybe you could just do a quick introduction to the people who are listening about who you are, what you do, and then maybe just have a think about that little question, where your creative practice and your research practice connect. And again, if there are any particular gaps that you think people should be diving into.
Okay, hello everybody. I was struggling with not giving all my data to Zoom, but here we are. Well, my name is Olga. I used to work as arts manager in different art sectors. And finally, in 2008, I went into circus and I was working with circus. And while I was working there, I started a PhD in cultural studies and my research was on circus. So I became an academic out of the blue without even planning nor even looking for it. It was kind of a chance. And right now I'm into the academic world. I am doing research. So for me, those practices are together right now. So my creative and my research practice are one. And the way they relate is to doing research in a creative way as much as we can. And this is by saying that what I do is to try to combine what artists and the practices need in terms of research, how research can serve that, and the other way around, rather than just doing research for knowledge per se, or for publishing, or for following this academic path that is not a path, in my opinion, if it's not applied. So that's the way I'm combining both. And regarding the gaps, I think that's a big gap, and is how to conduct research outside of traditional academia. That is what Charlie was talking about. And that's the main challenge in academia, and is to bring these other perspectives and these other ways of knowledge to produce knowledge and to apply and so on. I think that's a gap, but I think that's also changing a lot, and it's a huge change. You go now to academic conferences and you can see that people from very different backgrounds are producing knowledge or giving conferences, bringing their perspectives from these diverse worlds. Academia was like a very single profile, no, of these white men, blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, that's not working anymore. Somehow more voices are coming in, and academia is challenging themselves and is trying to open up. So I think that's a challenge. And in terms of circus, is like in this path of circus becoming respected art form and a serious subject of a study, is kind of losing these representative elements like the romantic, the nostalgic, the fun, the playfulness. So I think that's the main challenge in circus research, to don't leave those elements aside just to become a respected academic or art form.
Sorry, can you just say that again? I misheard. Was that, do you think that those elements should be left aside, or you think the challenge is to not leave them aside? Ah, good. Yeah. Otherwise I was going to fight you.
No, it's not to kill circus in
Good,
the
yeah.
path of becoming respected. No, romanticism is respected, magic is respected, and we have to keep challenging that.
Great, thank you. And Claire, we were just coming around. Did you have particular gaps that you were thinking about when we asked that question?
Well, I was just thinking a bit like Charlie, you know, I don't see myself as an academic, even though I've done postgrad, you know, degree with the drama therapy, for example, and then recently having returned to writing. But certainly in my, you know, I've been researching to feed my creative practice, not for any degree or any postdoc or whatever research, but having found myself entering into this world and doing a lot of research, a lot of it is orally transmitted, you know, whether it's Celtic or Siberian or Japanese. And so in that sense, my research has meant that I have needed to go to the places to meet the people, and it all takes time. Certainly from the clown perspective as well, I kind of feel, oh, I work in clown and shamanic work, and both of them can be very misinterpreted. And also there are many different ways. So it's certainly in terms of clown, just even the use of the word is so interpreted differently in different countries. And so that, in that sense, you know, there is a lot of research, but also there's so much more, I think, to be done. like my show, which people say, I didn't know you could clown about something like child loss. And it's like, well, I am. I didn't think I would ever be doing this either, but I am, and it's very important to me. And it you know, again, this slightly links to next week's talk on mental health, but it opens up a huge thing of not only what is clown, but also what are the benefits of exploring something in this way, of being open to everything that can exist. Yeah.
It seems like maybe the word academia, or the idea of like an academic establishment itself, is part of a barrier and a challenge, whereas the actual work of doing the research is fun and nourishing and all these positive things. But that work of doing the research isn't necessarily associated with the idea of academics that we have, or that I have in the UK anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think there's all these ideas here, and maybe people are listening and watching and think, oh yeah, I could research that, or I could go into that a bit more. And hopefully this will be encouraging, because actually those institutions are changing, like Olga says, and they're not the important thing. The important thing is finding the knowledge and filling these gaps and things. So I just remove a kitten from my next prompt. I'll show you again, because Olga hasn't seen the kittens yet. There we go. But Jezebel was sitting on the next prompt, which was what are the challenges for people researching circus? And then I've also got some questions coming in from the panel below. So if we can answer this question, and then I'll feed in from the chat window, if that's all right. So yeah, any other challenges that you've come across? Laura's got her hand up, so she can go first.
Hi. I haven't got a kitten. I've got a dog. Wait. I mean, mine were maybe this is a bit boring, but it's like the actual practical challenges of doing a practice-led PhD, where I needed to train as an aerialist, make work, or do practice-led research, and write a thesis and do actual academic, like book library research. On top of that, for me, it was just a practical, like me not having enough energy and having to put in sort of 7 days a week for sort of 4 to 5 years. At the beginning, I didn't imagine how hard it would be. And I don't think there's a lot of experience supervising in a doctoral research context. There's not a lot of experience supporting students doing that. I think because academia and circus is so new, the kind of practical restrictions around physicality and energy resources, we don't know about that yet. So that's a practical problem. The other problem is that there isn't a lot of other research, again, in a sort of academic books, journals, publications. There's not a lot to sort of support your research. So we're still kind of grappling and stabbing around in the dark a bit. I guess the trick is to be able to try and bring in useful information from other disciplines as well to help contextualize your own practice. But that's also a really exciting thing as well as a problem. So.
If nobody's immediately jumping in to answer that, Claire, we've had a question via the chat from Peter, which says, how do you mix comedy with your child loss? Which I guess is the big question, but yeah, how to find that?
Well, I mean, it again stemmed from my actual experience of, you know, to lose my child in the toilet of the A&E department and then have to walk down and ask for something, and I was given a giant nappy, and I'm like, come on, you know. But it's like, you know, lose my child and get given a nappy. I had to laugh because I was walking, I felt like John Wayne walking down the, you know, waddling down, and I was with a very good friend, and I just burst out laughing. I mean, sometimes you've got to laugh. And the second admission to hospital, a woman's giving birth underneath me, and a woman with dementia is howling in the corridor, and I'm like, birth, death, in between. So from a lived experience, I found the comedy, and it also, that's what got me through. And then certainly when I have my performance and I'm you know, with the audience and around, it's extremely interactive, and people have a choice of whether to be involved or not. In Japan, they were picking up all the birch bark and playing with it and enjoying how it was falling and having a laugh, and then sometimes, you know, people will fight with it or whatever. But it's also the celebration as well as the tears and how close these emotions are. And I've just been working in Siberia, just came back, and a friend actually sent me a text about the closeness of laughter and tears in Buryat and Mongolian folklore. And yeah, I find it in my way, and other people find it too, but you know, I can't answer for those that experience it. But I think for me, that's where the power of clown can really be so strong, is that fluidity and the quick changing from one emotion to another.
Thank you. And we've had another question in the Q&A window as well, which is on the subject of academia with the practice of clown. This is Chiara Thorburn, has a feeling that some clown teaching and in workshops there's a stigma about intellectualizing clowns, or taking notes and reflecting rather than the just doing. So her question is, what do the panelists think about the rules of clowning? And she references Avner the Eccentric's rules, but also the adaptations by other people. So yeah, how do people feel about clowning and rules and intellectualization?
Well, I can, yeah, go on, Olga.
That is related to the challenges. And well, I don't know, I'm not gonna talk about clowning specifically, but it's related. And I think the main challenge is to bring this circus way of doing things to study and to analyze the whole, the practice. What we tend to do is to intellectualize every piece, because it's the way that academia works and the way that theater especially has been studied. So what we see a lot in circus is that this kind of way of doing things in theater are applied into circus more than circus bringing up their essence to understand and to analyze the practice. So I think that's one of the main challenges, and that apply with this intellectualizing clowning, and is more bringing the ways of doing things or the ways of learning in clowning, of creating, into the analysis rather than the other way around.
Oh. Can't hear you, Kate.
Kate, your microphone's off.
Good. Thanks, guys. Sorry, I was asking if Charlie had something to add to that, because I thought I'd seen a suggestion that he was going to speak before, but I didn't have my microphone on. So yes, was there other responses to that question?
I think I did have a response, but you know, that was about 30 seconds ago, so I've forgotten it.
Fair enough. So we've also had a question from Sue Broadway about how is the current crisis in academia impacting on your plans? And I'm not entirely sure what the crisis is, because I'm quite new into kind of academic institutions, but I guess maybe it's to do with not secure jobs and sorry, kitten attack. Yeah, the insecurity and the low pay and low kind of standards for people who make academic progress their career. My suspicion is that this probably isn't going to affect the people on our panel so much, because you're coming from the practice base and the academic side of it is furthering your practice rather than being a career move in its own right. But maybe you can elaborate on that, people.
All I can say is, you know, not being affiliated to an academic institution, but certainly I had plans for my research practice as research as well in Japan for this year, which has all obviously been postponed or cancelled in other stuff. But yeah, it's, I can't answer specifically in terms of academic, but certainly in terms of the research in practical terms, it ain't happening outside, but it means I've realized, okay, well then this means I've got more time here. I'm going to have to do it through the books. I'm going to have to, you know, find the time, because I also can't work in the hospitals as a healthcare clown. So I need to change this around, see what works. And it looks like I am going to be going into the books because I can't go out, can't do the practical.
Thank you. I realise that all my nodding along and my nice agreement noises aren't really working because I've got my microphone switched off. So yes, I'm agreeing. So I saw another hand up. I think it might have been Laura's.
I didn't put my hand up, but am I muted? No, you can hear me now. Yeah, you can hear me now? Yeah. Yeah, I'm not affiliated to an institution. My kind of academic role is freelance, like my artistic practice right now, and I'm predominantly a touring artist rather than Kate the kitten. That's where most of my income comes from, and I tend to take on sort of like freelance sort of 2 or 3 week teaching projects. But I also do quite a bit of teaching online when it happens, because I teach at institutions abroad, and to sort of save on travel and, you know, not flying too much, etc. Sometimes it makes sense to do sort of teaching sessions via Skype, and I was doing those before the coronavirus outbreak, and strange as they are possible, but that's it.
Okay, and I can definitely see a notification at the bottom of my screen that Charlie has raised his hand via the raise hand function, but that might have been testing the raise hand function. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I'll raise my hand again. There we go. Oh, there we go, right. Can you hear me? Do you want to hear? Can you hear me? Good Lord, I think you can. I think the really interesting thing about the current situation is that it forces us to think beyond the box and to work in ways like that we haven't done before, perhaps. I've had an amazing week trying to track down who was the first 5 club juggler. And there's sort of lore about it. There's sort of, you know, histories sort of that have been recounted from the 1912s, 1920s. So the interesting thing was to go through all of the online newspaper archives that there are now available online to look for contemporary corroborated accounts of 5 club juggling. And the first one that come up with as an absolute definite is this chap, Willie Hanvar. There's a camera. There we go. Willie Hanvar in 1901. And that kind of research that can happen when everything is shut is just incredible. So yeah, wow, the internet, amazing resource.
Your reception was going out a little bit there, Charlie, in and out. So I think we caught most of it on the recording, but the idea was that you using online resources to fill in the gaps where you can't access the physical resources at the moment. Was that the gist of it? And we didn't quite see the thing, or I didn't on my screen. We didn't see the thing that you showed up as an artifact. Are you able to? Oh yeah, there he is. And can you just say again who he was? Because
the interesting thing is that the power of the online resources are so strong now. So I've been looking at the newspaper archives around the world and trying to find contemporary and corroborated accounts of the first Five Club juggler. You know, because I fell down a rabbit hole. There's no particularly good reason for doing it, but it did throw up this chap Willie Hanvar in 1901 as being the first one to have that written down, corroborated evidence at the time. And that's the kind of research that a few years ago would have been impossible in this kind of situation. So that's just an upside, if you like, of the world we now live in these difficult times.
Great, thank you. And Olga, I know you're in Colombia at the moment, but I know you also do some work within the UK and British universities. And do you find that the academic situation is similar everywhere you go, or is it got very different in different countries?
No, it's really different, and different challenges too. And I think, well, to get a job in academia is really difficult, if not impossible. And more for people who are joining it at a late stage, because you have to have a long list of published articles that most of us don't have, because we didn't work in academia before. So that's quite hard. In Colombia, it was different. It was easier somehow if you are inside universities. But nowadays, with a lot of competition, they are trying to bring more international teachers that have that can raise the rank of the universities, the ranking. So that's the main challenge we have, that they need these people who have this load of publications and so on that can raise the university rank, so they can have more resources. Right. So that's the main challenge to work in academia, and that's also something that you don't want to follow, because then you have just to publish and do crazy stuff just to comply with these rules. Mm-hmm. So the main challenge, what I do is more to work in research projects rather than looking for a job in academia. Mm-hmm. And that's also difficult, because if you're not a part of an institution, it's really hard to apply for this funding. And what I'm reading now in the UK, for example, is that foreign students are quitting universities in the UK because they are staying abroad. So resources are shorter, so probably they would cut resources for research, and so on and so on. So the situation inside universities, both here and there, is quite challenging because of resources. And in Colombia is even worse, because there are just few universities. In the UK. It's like,
yeah. Okay, thank you. And we are sort of within now the last quarter of our panel chat. It goes really quickly, I find. And I did want to sort of bring things back to clowning, because we are being hosted by the Clown Power channel. So my prompt there was other examples of clowning research that are particularly interesting to you, or you've come across over your lives. But we've also had a question in from John Davidson in the audience, who asks about who controls the narrative about what clown is or can be, with universities and practical in-person training going different ways or not functioning. Say, who now will be responding, research and innovating, and to that extent controlling what the clown narrative is. Over to you.
I don't know, but I just know, for example, the media frenzy over what is clown. Clowns are scary, blah, blah, blah. You can't be a clown in a hospital environment because it's, you know, and it's like, well, who is saying that? And, you know, why? And can't we stay with it and educate and open up to other possibilities, or is it going to be the media that dictates what is okay and what isn't in terms of the word clown? You know, it's a huge thing, and yeah, just like any art form, there's loads of different types of and ways of clowning, and each clown is unique. So where do you know, I don't really know what to say to that, really, because I know for my own thing, I had no idea I'd end up doing what I'm doing now, but I find it fascinating, and it's so, for me, healing and life enriching to be going out in loads of different kinds of places and combining clown and ritual and shamanic stuff and doing modern things in very ancient sacred places. And it's yeah, but is that clown? I don't know.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that question from John there? Charlie's raised his hand.
So for me, there are two parts to this. On the one hand, you have an audience, in a way, is the person ultimately, or people who ultimately determine what clown is or isn't. They're the people who respond to something in a way that we would recognise as being related to clown. Then there's a question of where you get the resources that enable you to be able to create the clown work. And the resources historically, to my mind, were individual private workshops. It was the world of Philippe Gaulier and so on, and you would go and do the course. Hello, my internet connection is unstable. Raise your hand if you can't hear me. Raise your hand if you can hear me. Okay, I've gone again, I think.
Okay, well, maybe we'll come back to Charlie there because his internet's coming in and out.
Oh, okay. Obviously, got the internet here.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll come back to Charlie in a minute. Chiara's fed into the chat saying that she agrees, thinks like the artists and critics maybe have different perspectives that feed the public perception of what clowning or clown is, which I agree with, and that's why I'm doing that sort of research for my PhD. That also gives me a chance to just plug some other editions, I think is the word, of this Clown Power Chat series that Dave Spathaki has been running, because we did do one on criticism, circus criticism, on Wednesday, which is now up on the YouTube channel, which is Zoological. And Dave, who has been running the Clown Power platform and has set up this Zoological channel, also has a Patreon. So if you think these chats are worthwhile and are a good thing to keep going, then you can support him on patreon.com/zoological. So I've got my plug in, and we're also going to be able to put links to the work and not contact details, but website links and that sort of thing to all our panelists in the descriptions once this chat is put up onto YouTube. So you can follow through some of those links if you want to find out more about the people who've been speaking today. I know that we've got one question from Mariana here, which is probably directed mostly to Claire, but other people might have some ideas as well. Says, can you mention or point a direction for those who are starting a research on shamanic clown?
I'm afraid I can't, because I'm doing quite a lot of research into this whole thing, and ancient practices. I mean, there are different books that talk about aspects of this from an ancient, point of view. Hopi Indians, or Pueblo, or Japan, Okinawa and Hokkaido, and Siberia again. But again, mine's all been very much oral people telling me from when I've been in the lands of people telling me the stories or introducing me to people, but I haven't myself, I haven't found anything specifically on that so far.
Thank
But
you.
maybe someone out there listening to this and seeing this does.
The panel are not looking forthcoming, but if I get anything in the text window, I will feed that back in. Another question that we've had there is, are there any trends that people see in clown work? And I suppose I can maybe extend that a little bit to the other kind of comic and circus areas that you work in. So that's from Ludwig Schukin, his question. Oh, and sorry, Holly Stoppett has fed in that for shamanic clown, start with Sue Morrison. So that's the answer there for people looking in that direction. But yeah, what trends in clown work have people seen recently or in the past?
Can I just add, sorry, just add to that, that the clown through mask that Holly's talking about, Sue Morrison. Yeah, clown through mask.
Thanks. Okay, seems like trends in clown isn't getting a lot of oh yeah,
I want to participate, but it's just not my area of expertise at all. No, I don't know about trends in clown, I'm afraid. I think sometimes people describe a lot of the work in contra as clowning, and they ask about what kind of training I've done, but it's really all a bit of sort of bit of a blag, maybe is a bit of an overshoot, but it hasn't come from any specific training. And I think what's interesting is I'm now taking an interest in clowning, having done a show where I explore that kind of oscillation, like you were talking about, Claire, between kind of laughter and tears and grief and celebration. And that oscillation is really, I'm realizing actually is really central to my practice, and it's making me want to sort of dive back in and actually think about the mechanics of clowning and how I can kind of maybe reinterrogate my practice with a sort of stronger or more informed methodology.
And Olga has an answer also.
I'm not an expert in clowning either, but when I was doing the research, I found a very interesting movement here in Colombia in clowning. And one of them was a traditional clown, kind of a Eurocentric clown, to say it in a way. And he was doing some work with indigenous communities in a specific region here. And it was hard, but an organization, local governmental organization, and this guy went there, and through these clowning techniques, they ended up bringing up a lot of traditional celebrations from these indigenous communities. So it was this kind of mix of these clowning techniques, like the traditional ones, that unearthed a lot of rites and clowning-ish traditions from these indigenous communities. So in the end, these guys, what they did was to merge and to bring together these like ancestral traditions with the clowning to probably to uncover like these kind of traditions. And some other clowns here are just researching their own identities as Latin Americans and as these mixed backgrounds through clowning. So they're creating these new characters that came from the mix of the Spanish, Americans, and blah. So what I found is like clowns are really looking into their own identities and creating clowning characters through those identities, even combining with these indigenous communities. And
yeah. Thank you, that is interesting. And we've also had a couple of people who from the clowning world feeding into the various text chats here, suggesting feminist clowning, transgender clowning, climate change clowning, all these trends that are not just in the clowning world, they're very relevant issues in a more global society, I suppose, but that is naturally feeding in to clowning innovations, because clowning speaks to the world. And what else have we got? Online TikTok. Oh yeah, the little videos, people trying to, I guess, create a digital version of clowning. It says clown check on there as well from John Davison. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but also teenager driven and the drag king scene are all sort of trends that are popping up from people's comments. And Betty Grumble, I'm not sure what that relates to, but she's just there as a as a clown trend. So thank you for feeding all those in. We are coming to the end now of the chat. So I just wondered if there were any kind of burning themes or discussions that the panelists had wanted to talk about when they were invited on that maybe haven't had a chance to bring out yet, or any questions that you have?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you, Kate, and everybody, because it's really interesting, opening up lots of discussion, and yeah, it's really cool and inspiring. Yeah.
You're welcome. And I'm looking around the screen of faces and everybody's looking quite content and not very questioning. So, oh, there was a little blurb from Charlie, yeah.
So hopefully you can hear me. Just do tell me if you can't. So the key thing for me with the relationship between, if you like, the everyday historical or contemporary world of the go out there and perform and the academic world is learning to bridge the gap. And if you don't come from an academic background, then quite a lot of the language, quite a lot of the articles are a real struggle to get one's head around, which on the one hand is fantastic because it means that there's stuff there to get into and to learn, and on the other hand is potentially a barrier. And so the interesting way is perhaps how we can bridge those gaps between the fully established academic world and the unacademic world.
Yeah, that reminds me, I did have a question before this all started that went out my head and has just come back in the last 2 minutes, which was about how there's so much education out there now for people to become circus practitioners in various ways, but that seems in most cases to be very divorced from theoretical thinking. There's the physical thinking and the theoretical thinking that are not combining. So I think that's maybe a way forward in a lot of the pedagogies, the word I can never say, to go. And Laura, you had your hand up as well there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just it's like an observation, really. I think just to sort of respond to what you said, Charlie, about the separation, I do think we've taken a big jump in circus. Suddenly we've got, you know, it's gone from terms of, if we think about schooling, there's been a big shift between you went to circus school to get really good at circus so you could go and be a circus performer. And there's been this movement that's kind of shot not out of nowhere, but shot up pretty quickly, which is that you can also be an academic, but we actually don't have the infrastructure in circus schools to support students in that as of yet. Partly because the structuring isn't there, partly because the research hasn't been done to fully teach yet, but also I think because lots of schools are still in a transition period with regard to what the objectives are for students when they leave. And I think while schools are still predominantly focused on providing highly skilled physical performers for the industry, which is not a problem, but it is a particular result, then you're not going to be producing circus academics. And that's just how it is. And so in terms of making things, I don't know if it's a case of making things more accessible, but trying to just integrate, I guess, that relationship into learning at an earlier stage. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. Microphone off. Good. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think there are like whispers of that coming out, that maybe that's starting to be recognised, and maybe that's where things are going to go over the next 10 years or 20 years. I have been given an answer. Betty Grumble is an Australian sex clown. So for people, when I called out her name and didn't say anything, if you want to go and do some research, that might be a fantastic place to start on a Easter Sunday afternoon. And other clown trends there typed in: theatrical clown, Gaulier style, conceptual clown, comedians mixing sketch with clown, and again, feminist derived work. So there's a lot there. And if you do want to start with what is a sex clown, Betty Grumble was actually on episode 2 of the Clown Power Chat, so you could go back and watch one of those on the YouTube channel. This always seems to happen. Things start getting meaty and then we realize our hour is up. So I am going to have to thank you all and say goodbye. And I've noticed the sun come up over Olga's screen, which is nice. Oh, Kat saying goodbye. And I hope you have lots of nice chocolate or yummy things to see you through your Easter day and quarantine. Have a nice afternoon all. Thanks for coming.
Bye, thank you.
And then I have to figure out how to let go of the computer.